James Harris, an African-American businessman, has just become the owner of an elite building, but a security guard refuses to let him into his own property. Soon, his fight for justice will turn everything upside down, for the company and the entire city. What he did next will shock even the most experienced. But let's start from the beginning. James Harris stood in front of the tall glass entrance to the office building, feeling a strange excitement in his chest. He had just signed the final documents, and now, after 10 years of hard work, he was the owner of this prestigious building in the city center. Every decision, every challenge, every humiliation he had endured along the way was now behind him. In his hands, he held real power, and this was his achievement. Deep down, he knew that purchasing the building was more than just a business move. It was a victory over those who had called him a failure when he was a child, a victory over the system that had tried to break him. But no matter how much his status had changed, he still remembered every instance of racism he had faced. And now, standing in front of this building, he felt like he had taken a step that would help prove to himself and everyone else there is a place for a black man in business. James walked toward the door when a security guard appeared from around the corner, a white man in his 40s, in uniform, with a clear wariness in his eyes. He looked James up and down and froze in place. A few seconds of silence. Then the guard spoke. "Sorry, sir, you can't go in here," he said coldly. James stopped, raising his eyebrows in surprise. He looked at the guard, at his disgruntled expression, and then back at the door. Could it be that the guard didn't recognize him? "I'm the tenant of this building," James said calmly, already realizing that he was being seen not as the owner, but as just another person trying to get into the office space. The guard scoffed, clearly displeased. "This building is for tenants. If you want to enter, go through the main entrance." James took a deep breath, trying to suppress his anger. He was used to these situations, but each time it felt like a blow to his core. No, he wasn't going to leave just like that. He knew this moment was a test. "I'm the new owner," he said, trying to control his voice, but a shadow of anger flashed in his eyes. "Don't you recognize me?" The guard squinted slightly, clearly unconvinced. He looked James up and down, then glanced at his suit, still doubtful. "Well, if you say so, but I still can't let you through. Please go to the central entrance. They'll greet you there." James exhaled. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. It was racism hidden behind the mask of protocol. The guard saw him not as an owner, but as yet another black man who had no right to be in this place. "I'm here to meet your manager," James said, his irritation growing. "Can I pass, or should I call and confirm that I'm the owner?" But the guard just looked away and crossed his arms. "Sorry, sir, I can't let you through." James felt his anger rising, but he didn't want to give in to the provocation. All he had left to do was gather himself and prove that no one would dictate who belonged where, based on skin color. But for that, he needed to take a step that would change the course of this situation. "Fine," he said, turning to the guard. "I'll go through the main entrance, but remember who I am." When James entered the lobby, he was prepared for his meeting with the manager. He knew this moment was long awaited, and perhaps this was the step he needed to finally solidify his position. But something in the atmosphere of the building felt off. He noticed how employees quickly turned away, avoiding his gaze. No one wondered who he was or why he was entering through the main entrance instead of the back one. He headed for the elevator, but to his surprise, one of the employees, a young woman at the reception desk, appeared visibly uneasy. When James approached, she noticed him and clearly didn't know what to do. "Good afternoon," he said, trying to smile, but her reaction was distant. "I'm James Harris, the new owner of the building. Could I speak with the manager?" The woman froze, quickly glanced at some documents on her computer screen. Not knowing how to react, she said, "Sorry, I didn't expect you to be like this." Her words were full of uncertainty, and her gaze seemed fearful of saying something wrong. James felt his irritation rising inside, but he didn't let it show. "I need to speak with the manager," he repeated, trying to stay calm. At that moment, a voice called from behind. What's going on? Why are you here? It was the manager, Brian. James recognized him immediately. A white man in his 50s, dressed in a sharp suit. His face seemed friendly, but James could sense something was off. I'm James Harris, he said, extending his hand. The new owner. Brian looked at James as though trying to catch something unclear in his words. After a moment, his face twisted into a faint smirk. Oh, you must be joking, he said, holding back a smile. We agreed that tomorrow. You must have mixed up the dates. James felt his jaw clench. This was becoming not just strange, but outright humiliating. Brian not only didn't believe that James was the new owner, but he was also clearly trying to ignore him. I'm serious, James replied, his unease becoming more evident. Check your documents. I signed the contract with your lawyer. We were scheduled to meet today. The manager glanced at the computer screen of the receptionist, then back at James. No, sir, there's nothing here. I'm sorry, but you must be mistaken. James knew he couldn't let this moment slip by. His patience was wearing thin, and he was ready to raise his voice, but at that moment, Mary, the building's secretary, a woman in her 40s with a kind expression, appeared. She noticed what was happening and immediately approached them. Brian, she said, her gaze firm but respectful. This is James Harris. He's not mistaken. It really is him. Brian froze. His face went pale when he realized he had missed an important detail. Mary took out her phone, opened the documents, and showed them to the manager. Look, she continued. His name is in our contract as the new tenant and owner. I personally verified it. The manager looked stunned. He stood silent for a few seconds, then, clearly trying to justify himself, said, I'm sorry, I didn't know. It's just that we didn't expect. Mary interrupted him. That's no excuse. James is our new owner. He deserves respect. At that moment, James realized this. James had barely walked away from the building when his phone beeped. A message from his lawyer, Michael, appeared on the screen. Are you okay? I heard there were issues with access. We need to meet urgently and discuss the next steps. James quickly dialed the number. Michael was already aware of the incident, and his voice sounded concerned. James, I've told you before, if you're facing racism in this building, we'll fight on all fronts. You need to make an official statement and go public. Don't let this go unaddressed. But James wasn't sure. He didn't want to escalate the conflict right away. He needed more evidence. He felt that if he raised a fuss too soon, the story would backfire, and he'd be accused of blowing things out of proportion. All right, let's see what we can do. But I'm not making any rash decisions. Give me some time. Michael agreed, but warned that the situation couldn't remain unresolved. He suggested an independent investigation to confirm the racist behavior within the building. The next morning, James returned to the office to meet with Mary. He hoped she would help him understand what was really going on. She was the only person in the building who wasn't afraid to speak the truth. Mary, I need your help, James said as he entered her office. I know you see how things work here. Why is everyone staying silent? She looked at him and took a deep breath. I don't want trouble, Mary said, but her expression betrayed inner conflict. But you're right. Brian and the guards always act as if they can't believe a black person could be the owner. This isn't the first time they've checked someone this way. But with you, it went further. I'm willing to help if you decide to act. James felt his resolve strengthening. If he left this alone, nothing would change. He needed to change the system. I'm ready to act. Tomorrow morning, I'll post a video of this incident on social media, he said. Mary nodded, agreeing to this risky move. That evening, James filmed the video. He stood in front of the camera, not hiding his disappointment or anger. Hello, my name is James Harris, and I just became the owner of this building, he began, pointing to the facade. But when I came here, I was not allowed to enter my own office. This isn't just a mistake, it's racism, and I'm ready to expose it. He went into detail about how the security guard refused to let him in, and how the manager tried to ignore his ownership. James ended the video with a call for justice and respect, emphasizing that he wasn't alone in his fight. Once the video was posted, the reaction was swift. Within an hour, it had gathered thousands of views, and people began sharing it across social media. The comments came in two streams. Some supported James, while others doubted his version of events. Suddenly, his phone rang. It was a call from the local news channel. "James, we saw your video. We'd like to interview you. Can you meet us in an hour? We think this is an important story." For James, this was a moment that could change everything. He knew that this wouldn't just be a public exposure. It was a chance for many people to understand how racial biases worked within their own communities. An hour later, he was in the studio. The cameras rolled, and the journalist asked the first question. "James, how do you explain that the security guard didn't recognize you, despite your role as the owner?" James didn't hesitate. "This isn't a mistake, it's bias," he replied. "In our culture, there's this perception that black people can't be successful owners, managers, or business people. When I came into this building, they decided I didn't belong here." The interview sparked a storm of reactions in the comments. The next morning, James woke up with the feeling that the world around him had changed. His video had already amassed hundreds of thousands of views, and the news about the incident had spread throughout the city. Social media was abuzz with discussions. Some supported his fight for justice, while others called his actions overly dramatic. But now, no one could ignore what had happened. At work, the tension was palpable. He saw colleagues who had previously ignored him now seeking out conversations. But what surprised him most was how quickly things had changed inside the building itself. Internal meetings that used to have nothing to do with him were now the top topic of discussion. New security measures were being discussed, and political standards were being reviewed. It was clear that public pressure had become stronger than corporate interests. But James wasn't about to stop there. He received a call from Mary, the secretary he had recently discussed the situation with. Her voice sounded alarmed. "James, this is getting out of control. Brian and the security guards are trying to make this personal. They don't understand what's going on." James knew that if the right steps weren't taken, this could all end in nothing. He immediately contacted Michael, his lawyer, and they arranged a meeting with the leadership of the real estate company that owned the building. They needed to figure out how to deal with the aftermath. When the meeting took place, top managers, lawyers, and security heads were present. They looked nervous, aware that the situation could lead to serious consequences if not handled decisively. "We understand that an incident occurred," began one of the directors, a man in his 50s, with a professional yet tense expression. "We've already initiated an internal review. This is not how we expect our employees to behave." James, not hiding his emotions, replied, "This isn't just a mistake, it's a systemic issue. If we don't fix this at the company level, this will be just the first case." "We're ready to make changes," another director interrupted. "We will conduct training for all staff, review our security policies, and assess employees." James listened silently, feeling his resolve only strengthen. He knew this meeting was just part of the victory. He might not get immediate results, but the public pressure and the support he had gained through social media were already preventing these people from staying indifferent. In the evening, James received another call, this time from the news channel. "We heard you're willing to approach the mayor. This could be a huge step. If you'd like, we'll be with you at the press conference. Are you ready?" James realized this was the moment when he could not only change the situation in one building, but also raise a broader question about racism in business and public life. The next day, he met with the mayor of the city. The local authorities, seeing the public activism, were ready to support James. The mayor personally apologized for the incident, stating that the city would support him in the investigation and take the necessary steps to prevent such situations in the future.